another dimension, another time and space, a parallel universe.
What if I told you some of the most colorful, upbeat cartoons from the 80s and 90s were secretly hiding plots that were shockingly dark? Shows we watched with cereal bowls in our hands were dealing with loss, corruption, brainwashing, and worlds on the edge of collapse. And most of us never even noticed. Behind the bright colors were canceled finales, unanswered mysteries, and villains far more twisted than kids' TV should have allowed. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the episodes, characters, and hidden lore you probably forgot existed. Remember to check the description for the link to the DVDs, hit like, click super thanks, and let's dive into 5 80s and 90s cartoons that were way darker than anyone remembers. At number 1, Pirates of Darkwater.
My dark water. Only Ren, a young prince, can stop it by finding the lost.
If you grew up in the early 90s, you probably remember bright, silly cartoons. But then there was Pirates of Darkwater, a show that felt like you accidentally wandered into something way too serious for kids. It opens with a dying king, a ruined kingdom, and an ocean crawling with a living, hungry black substance called Darkwater. That's already nightmare fuel. Our hero, Ren, isn't some goofy kid. He's a lost prince, suddenly told that he can only collect the 13 treasures of rule before the world is swallowed whole. And the world of Myr? It's this strange, shifting planet where seas move, rocks rise from nowhere, and the rules of nature seem broken on purpose. Even the ship Ren sails, the Wraith, is said to be built from mystical wood that still has a pulse. Did anyone else notice how alive that ship felt? Tell me in the comments if that creeped you out as a kid. Looking back now, the show wasn't just an adventure. There were some shockingly heavy themes baked into every episode. Darkwater wasn't just an evil goo. It was literally the planet dying from the inside out. Tula, who starts as a cheerful barmaid, turns out to be an ecomancer tied to the life force of the natural world. Ren isn't just collecting treasure. He's racing a clock to stop an extinction-level event. And Ayaz? Under the jokes, he's a former pirate trying to outrun the sins of his past. Even Niddler, the comic relief monkey bird, is actually a former slave who escaped Bloth's torture. Seriously, how was this considered a kids' show? Some episodes were straight up unsettling. Remember Bloth? That guy wasn't just a villain. He hunted down every possible heir to Ren's family for 17 years. And his ship, the Maelstrom, was made from the bones of giant dead leviathans, an entire warship built from corpses. Oh, and then there was the Constrictus, a huge worm creature living in the ship's stomach, ready to eat anyone who disobeyed him. The show treated this like normal punishment. There were also whole islands drained of life, seas twisting into impossible shapes, and the Dark Dweller lurking just out of sight. Rewatching it now feels like discovering a horror show hiding inside a treasure hunt. Behind the scenes, things were just as chaotic. The miniseries was the most expensive thing Hanna-Barbera had ever attempted. $500,000 per episode. They doubled the animation cells just to make Myr look alive and dangerous. But the cost was too high and the story too ambitious. Voice actors changed, scripts got rewritten, and the show kept jumping between networks. They wanted it to be a grand epic, but it was fighting a losing battle before it even aired. And then, just when the story was getting good, the show simply stopped. No final battle, no finished quest, no answers. Ren collected only 8 of the 13 treasures before the studio pulled the plug. Kids everywhere were left staring at the screen like, wait, that's it? The world of Myr was literally collapsing, the villain was mid-plan, and then everything just vanished. It's like the Darkwater swallowed the show itself. Watching it now hits way harder. As kids, we saw adventure. As adults, we see a world dying, a prince running from inherited trauma, a girl carrying the weight of nature itself, and a villain who embodies unstoppable corruption. The unanswered ending makes it feel even more haunting, like a prophecy we never got to see fulfilled. And maybe that's why this show sticks with people. It wasn't just dark for a cartoon, it was dark for any story. A lost world, unfinished, still waiting. Almost like dark water is still out there spreading. At number 2, The Tick, 1994 animated series. The Tick probably felt like stepping into a world you weren't supposed to see. It looked goofy on the surface, a big blue superhero and his nervous moth sidekick. But underneath the jokes, this show was strangely intense. Imagine a hero who doesn't even know where he came from, showing up at a superhero tryout in Reno like some unstoppable force of nature. Instead of being assigned to a glamorous city, he gets dumped into simply the city. A place so chaotic, it doesn't even earn a proper name. And suddenly, this clueless, overly sincere giant is fighting villains like Chairface Chippendale, a criminal who literally tries to carve his name into the moon. Did anyone else forget how weird that was until now? Let me know, because that moment alone made kids stop and stare. Beneath the laughs, The Tick was quietly poking fun at something bigger: the entire superhero world. The city is basically a broken place full of heroes who are, well, not that heroic. Deflator Mouse is a Batman parody who's more interested in flirting than saving lives. Sewer Urchin talks like Dustin Hoffman in Rain Man, but lives underground in filth so toxic it could melt bones. And American Maid, maybe the only competent hero, fights villains made of bread and evil plants while wondering why she has to carry everyone. Even Arthur, the so-called sidekick, is a former accountant traumatized by office life who just wants to survive every episode. Looking back, it feels like the show was telling kids, hey, sometimes the world is messy and silly, and people in charge don't always know what they're doing. Were we supposed to notice that as children? Or did it sneak into our brains without us realizing? Some episodes were so bizarre they bordered on disturbing. Like the villain Breadmaster, an angry baker who literally tries to smother the city in evil pastries. Or the Terror, an ancient supervillain who looks like he crawled out of a retirement home, but laughs like he has seen civilizations fall. And Chairface, he didn't just try to carve the moon once. The show actually kept a permanent scar on the moon in later episodes, as if the universe itself had been damaged forever. That's the kind of detail kids didn't catch. But adults rewatching now go, wait, the moon was still ruined? Why did no one fix that? It's these subtle, unsettling touches that made the comedy feel strangely serious, like the show was hinting at a darker world just off screen. Behind the scenes, things were just as wild. Creator Ben Edlund was still in college when his comic became a hit. And when a toy company wanted to turn it into a show, studios laughed at the idea. An absurd superhero? For kids? No way. Sunbow Entertainment finally took a chance, but the first script was rejected, and Edlund and writer Richard Liebman Smith had to rewrite everything in a frantic, sleepless weekend. Production fell behind because Edlund obsessed over every tiny detail, trying to avoid the bad 90s animation look. The irony? He said the show now looks like bad 70s superhero animation instead. That chaotic energy somehow made the series what it is. Even though it became a cult favorite, it never hit the massive success of shows like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Merch sales dropped, Fox pulled back, and after 3 seasons the show just stopped. A planned primetime special never happened. A live-action reboot came and went. And like that, The Tick faded from TV, leaving fans wondering what could have been. Now, watching it as adults, the satire hits harder. The Tick's endless optimism feels almost tragic. Arthur's anxiety feels real, and the villains feel like exaggerated versions of problems in society. The jokes hide something deeper, something slightly unsettling, like a reminder that the world is weird, chaotic, and a little broken. Just like the city itself. And maybe that's why this show still sticks with people. It wasn't just funny, it was quietly, brilliantly dark, and most of us never realized it. At number 3, Street Sharks.
Street sharks, street sharks. Oh, they're just...
If you were a 90s kid, you probably remember Street Sharks as the toy commercial disguised as a cartoon. But looking back, the story was way stranger than anyone realized. It all began with a scientist named Dr. Robert Bolton, who helped build a machine called the Gene Slammer, a device that could mix human and animal DNA like it was no big deal. But the moment Bolton tried to stop his partner, Dr. Paradigm, from misusing it, everything went wrong. He turned into a creature so frightening, the show never even showed his face. That alone makes you wonder, what exactly did he become? And if that wasn't wild enough, his 4 sons, John, Bobby, Clint, and Coop, were force mutated into shark-human hybrids. Did anyone else forget how scary that is when you think about it today? As the series went on, something darker pulsed underneath the bright lights and wild catchphrases. Fission City wasn't just a fun backdrop, it was a place where science spun out of control, and people were terrified of the unknown. Dr. Paradigm kept twisting innocent animals and humans into monsters just to prove his power, and the city actually believed his lies, hunting the heroic sharks like villains. That idea hits different now. Heroes who look scary, being feared by the very people they protect. And even though the sharks joked around and ordered burgers the size of their heads, there was always this uneasy feeling, like the show was asking if humanity would ever accept something that wasn't normal. Did any of us catch that when we were kids? Some episodes were surprisingly unsettling when you peel back the goofy surface. The moment Paradigm fused himself with piranha DNA and became Dr. Piranoid, the show crossed into body horror territory. Imagine watching your own face warp in real time. Kids saw that before bedtime. And remember Moby Lick, a regular guy who was mind-controlled and mutated into an orca man with a tongue long enough to lasso street poles. Or Rox, the musician who got fused with a bull shark but still had to pretend it was just a stage costume. These transformations weren't played as jokes. They were tragic, scary, and sometimes permanent. And then the show decided to add space dinosaurs and an entire raptor gang. At that point, were the writers trying to freak us out? However, Street Sharks was born from chaos. Mattel needed a toy line to compete with Ninja Turtles, so the show was greenlit fast. So fast that the story had to reshape itself around the action figures instead of the other way around. Characters' designs changed mid-season, plots jumped around with no explanation, and new mutants appeared only because new toys needed commercials. Even Dr. Bolton, the father who becomes a monster, vanished from the show because the writers couldn't figure out how to resolve his story in time. Imagine designing a major emotional arc and then abandoning it because production couldn't keep up. Street Sharks burned bright but fast. Ratings were strong, toys sold well at first, and kids everywhere were yelling, "Jawsome!" But as soon as sales dipped, the network pulled back. The show added the Dino-Vengers to refresh interest, then folded them into another series entirely, Extreme Dinosaurs. It was clear the studio wasn't trying to tell a story anymore. They were trying to save a brand. And when that didn't work, everything just stopped. No finale, no goodbye. The Bolton brothers simply swam off into cartoon limbo. So the show feels way heavier than it did back then. The mutations are creepier, the science experiments are more disturbing, and Dr. Bolton's disappearance feels almost tragic. Even the sharks themselves, kids turned into creatures forever, hit with a sadness you didn't notice as a child. And maybe that's why Street Sharks sticks in our memories. Not because it was silly, but because it was secretly dark. Maybe darker than any of us were ready for. At number 4, The Mighty Ducks, 1996 series.
Oh no, not again!
This show's gonna turn into a rerun of itself.
Most people remember Mighty Ducks as a fun hockey cartoon. But looking back, the story feels much stranger. It didn't start on Earth at all. It began on a cold alien planet called Puck World, where hockey wasn't just a sport, it was life itself. Kids watching in 1996 had no idea this world had already survived a full-on war with giant reptile monsters called saurians. The show wasn't just silly action. It opened with a hero named Canard finding a magic goalie mask that could see through invisible enemies. Even wilder, he risked everything for his team and got sucked into a dark dimension forever. For a kid's show, that's a pretty intense way to start, right? In the plot, the Ducks weren't just playing hockey. They were refugees. Their whole planet had been taken over, their leaders vanished, their friends enslaved. Wild Wing wasn't some goofy hero. He was a kid forced to become a leader after watching his best friend sacrifice himself. Even the villains felt unsettling. Lord Dragonus wasn't just a bad guy. He burned worlds, breathed fire, and screamed at his own team so violently he blew apart his robot soldiers. Rewatching it now, you notice how lonely and scared the Ducks really were, trying to save Earth when they couldn't even save their own home. Kids remembered hockey sticks and laser guns, but so many plots were weirdly dark. One episode turned a whole town into creepy clones. Another revealed a traitor duck named Lucretia who almost wiped out the entire resistance. There was even a wizard called Astaroth who became a massive dragon and tried to steal enough power to rule the world. And who can forget the episode where a scientist tried to splice people into monsters? It feels like every week someone was getting mind-controlled, mutated, drained of energy, or dragged toward dimensional limbo. It was the last show ever made for the Disney afternoon block, which was already fading away. Budgets were tight, episodes were rushed, and the darker tone didn't fit Disney's usual style. Even though the show had Starship's Mickey Thomas singing the theme song, it never had the marketing push of shows like DuckTales or Goof Troop. As writers added bigger villains and deeper lore, Disney pushed back. They wanted a toy-friendly hockey show, not an alien war drama. When the block ended, Mighty Ducks vanished almost overnight. No proper ending, no rescue for Canard, no final battle. The Ducks were stuck on Earth forever, and fans never got closure. Strangely, Disney buried reruns too, and many kids grew up thinking they dreamed the show. Rewatch it now and everything hits different. The empty planet, the lost hero, the villains hiding in the shadows of Anaheim. Even the humor feels like it's covering up something scary. And maybe that's why the show sticks with people. It wasn't just hockey, it was hope, loss, and a fight that never truly ended. Looking back, you can't help but wonder, how did this ever air on Disney? At number 5, Bucky O'Hare and the Toad Wars.
Something terrible's happened. We have to get back to Roggle 7 now.
The story behind the show was far stranger than most kids ever realized. The whole adventure took place in a parallel universe called the Aniverse, where entire planets were run by animals who talked, fought wars, and traveled through space just like humans. Bucky captained a ship called the Righteous Indignation, and everything seemed colorful and fun. Until you remember that his home planet was literally captured in the first episode. And the wildest twist? A human kid named Willie DeWitt got sucked into this universe through a broken photon accelerator in his bedroom. Imagine being 10 years old and falling into an alien world before homework. As bright as the show looked, its universe felt strangely heavy the moment you looked back. The Toad Empire wasn't just the bad guys, they were followers of a computer program called Complex, an AI that took over their entire society. In the cartoon, the Toads willingly obeyed it, which is weirdly creepier than being brainwashed. Even Bucky's crew carried secrets. Jenny, the soft-spoken cat who flew the ship, hid her psionic powers from everyone except Willie because her people lived by strict mystical rules. And Bruce, the giant baboon engineer, he didn't die. He was swallowed by another dimension. Kids watched that and just moved on. Did anyone ever stop to ask, what dimension was that exactly? Certain episodes hit way harder today. Storm toads marched like mindless drones, while Complex broadcast propaganda across the galaxy. Toadborg, the massive cyborg commander, looked like something from a nightmare factory. Half metal, half monster. And when Willie's parents turned off the portal machine in his room, they unknowingly trapped their son in another universe forever. In the comics, this moment was even worse, because they were proud pacifists who would have never allowed him to fight in a war. Imagine being a kid watching a storyline where someone is accidentally abandoned across dimensions and not realizing how terrifying that is. Behind the scenes, the show was supposed to launch a huge toy line, and the animation studio, ACOM, rushed to get episodes ready. But when the toy plans collapsed, everything collapsed with them. Sunbow, Marvel Productions, and Hasbro had built an entire marketing machine around Bucky, and suddenly the plug was pulled. The show ended at only 13 episodes, even though the world they built had deeper lore than most cartoons ever got. Once the toy line fell apart, the series vanished almost overnight. No finale, no proper wrap-up, even the BBC reruns disappeared quietly. Kids who loved it just woke up one day and it was gone, like it slipped into the same strange dimension Bruce fell into. Watching it now, everything feels heavier. The missing planets, the AI dictator, the quiet tragedies, the characters who never came back. What looked like a silly space cartoon was actually a story about war, loss, and worlds on the edge. Maybe that's why Bucky O'Hare still feels unforgettable. It wasn't just weird, it was secretly haunting.
Weapons inoperative, foe most formidable.
And there you have it. 5 cartoons from the 80s and 90s that were way darker than anyone remembers. These shows pushed boundaries, slipped in wild themes, and left us with twists still worth talking about. If you want to revisit the madness yourself, check the description for the links to the DVDs and dive back in. Don't forget to like, drop a comment, subscribe, and click Super Thanks. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.